Thank you very much, Tim. Just as a little bit of background to our product, a tear film spread over the eye with each blink, and this tear film keeps the eye healthy. And about 20% of people have a faulty tear film. And this is often manifest in a condition called dry eye, which you might know about. The problem is that you can't see the tear film, and it's therefore really difficult to diagnose tear film problems. TearView, which is our device, appears to be a simple camera, and what it does, it actually enables the tear film to be seen in real time. Although it looks simple, it really is based on the absolute latest cutting-edge infrared technology, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I just remembered I've got to do this slideshow. Oh dear. So for some reason, just 1 second, I'll get my slideshow working. Stop sharing. Share screen. Okay, let's see. Okay, there you go. Sorry about that. Okay. Yep. So the very beginning, I've been studying at the university with research and so on the tear film for more than 20 years. And I guess I've realised over time my mind works a little bit differently. And I had this idea that through certain technology, we might be able to see the tear film. And so I spent a lot of money in developing the initial technology and started to try to look at my tear film. Turns out I was the problem. My tear film is a very super tear film, and we just couldn't see any changes to my tear film. We had fans blowing on my eyes, we put me in cold rooms, we put me in hot rooms, it just didn't work. So then I thought, well, perhaps we'd better look at other people's tear films. And all of a sudden, I realised we could see the tear film in real time. This was a real breakthrough. So understanding that the technology was based on infrared, we immediately contacted the best people in infrared technology to give us a hand. And how did we do that? Well, of course, you look in the yellow pages. It turned out that there was a company just nearby called Infratherm. Now, these chaps have been developing and working in infrared for a large number of years. And to my surprise, in later days, when we've visited people overseas and we've mentioned Infratherm, they actually say to us, these guys are the best in the world. So that was just a delight. So in 2017, late in 2017, we formed our company, Beyond 700. And as you know, this is how a startup company is usually portrayed. You can see their sleeves are all rolled up. They've got the team uniform of the tight jeans and no doubt pointy shoes. The CEO is sitting there on the desk, but you'll notice that the chap with his coffee cup is actually thinking, what the hell do I do with my coffee cup now, because you've taken up that space. So that's what a typical startup company looks like. And this is us. It's quite a different appearance. We're all old, but let me tell you that we actually are having lots of fun losing money. We've manufactured our device. Our software works, not always perfectly, but it works. We're actually at a stage of recruiting key opinion leaders. We're well advanced with regulatory affairs. In fact, we have TGA approval and trademarks and patents are in hand.
And I understand actually, just before you leave that side, that pretty much as we speak, you've launched the product. Like a week or two ago, you were still only using it for research purposes, but you're actually now officially launched with your product.
That's correct. We're now placing it in key opinion leaders' hands. So that's really exciting.
Congratulations on a big milestone. It's a long journey, I know, for a lot of companies.
Thank you. So I decided at the stage.
So just before you move on, if you could go back to that, I think you missed the piece there about that you in fact were a scientist at University of Western Sydney, and
That's right.
you developed this sort of initial technology at the university. How did you transition from the university to the company? What sort of deal did you have to do with the university?
So the university itself, there are regulations, and which basically all of the IP which is developed in the university owns. And however, so we have to declare that, which we did, and then the university actually has a certain time frame to do something with it. It was we had a number of negotiations with the university, and it was slow. And so we reached that time frame, and then we said, well, are you going to do something with it or not? And at that stage, they decided that they weren't. And so they signed over all of the IP to us. The advantage of that is that it gives us enormous flexibility, and we can do what we like with it. They have no rights whatsoever to this technology, but we encompass all of the costs. That's the downside of that, but it works, and we're really glad that we're dealing with it, and we have that enormous flexibility. It's been great.
And how long had the clock been ticking on the IP before you managed to gain control of it? Like, how much time did you lose off the patent period?
Yeah, 6 months. That's all. So it's not very long. By the time it's good, actually. The policy in the university is actually quite good. They realised that. So I think Stanford University did a big research thing into what IP works and what IP doesn't, and they couldn't find any relationship between anything. And they've decided at Stanford just to hand it all over to the developers. And there's a purview, and I think I have that purview as well, that when it's ultimately successful and paying money, then the university gets something back. But there's no contract in that way. So, it's just a gratefulness for having the opportunities and all the rest of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so clearly if you start a business, you want it to be successful. And so the first thing I had to do, which is I'm totally ignorant of business. So I tried to learn about business and did a couple of courses, in fact. And one was run by Cicada, which was really great. And what I thought about success was that you need to understand what the fundamental of success is for your business. So I looked at Google, and it actually surprised me because in each site I looked up, there were 3 to 8 fundamentals of success, which didn't gel with me. A fundamental's a fundamental. There shouldn't be six or 8 or 3. And surprisingly, each of those fundamentals was then divided up into another 3 fundamentals. And for a fee, we can help you with this. And so I quickly realised that if it seems like brain smearing material, it probably is. So have confidence in yourself. Listen politely, try it. If it sounds attractive, ignore it and move on. Don't, and you need to do that. Be prepared for it. And what you really need...
So can I just ask on that? Obviously, there are some, service providers that you probably did need, and
Yes.
some that you didn't.
Right.
Did you have a sort of a criteria for those that were actually, things that were made sense to sort of? I know you did most of this in-house. You've done virtually everything in-house, but things like regulatory and the payment.
I'll talk about that a bit later on. It is important, and some decisions it just becomes really clear what you can do and what you can't do, and so I'm sure these questions will be answered when I get to that stage. Okay, so what's really important is to know what success looks like to you, and in that regard, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. So I want you to imagine that you've been invited to the opening of King Tut's burial chamber. There are 14 people invited and you're one of them. You've been waiting 3 days for this to happen because you're waiting for Lord Carnarvon to come along and be part of this opening. And finally it comes and you crawl through the tunnels to the chamber and you're standing about 15 feet away from the opening because it's dangerous. It's quite frankly dangerous. We don't know what's going to happen. And you've waited 3 hours and there's this musky smell and there's this acrid smell as well as body odour and some cheap perfume covering it. And then all of a sudden, there in the distance is Carter, and he's peering in. He can see what's in the chamber and he's opening it up. And then that silence is broken and Lord Carnarvon asks, "Can you see anything?" Everyone's been dying to answer that question. And Carter slowly turns back to you and he says, "Yes, wonderful things." And he didn't say gold goblets. He didn't say hieroglyphics. He didn't say that because success to him was what all of that meant. And what it meant was a whole transformation in Egyptology and understanding and the science and so on. So success meant something very special to him, not those trinkets, but what that added to knowledge. So it's really important that you know what success looks like to you. And then from that, you'll know your fundamentals to success, what that is, and be able to identify it, and consequently, your measure of success. These are really important things. For me, it's actually very similar. I want clinicians to see the wonderful things which I see with the tear film. It is so different from what their current belief is. I want that to happen. To allow that to happen, I need to enable clinicians to use our device. And even within the short time of placing it in the key opinion leaders' hands, they're loving it. And they just got, wow, we can do so much. It's got this real wow factor, which is terrific. And my measure of success is them seeing these wonderful things. It's just fantastic. It's fantastic to see and to hear what they want to do with it. My failure, and unfortunately, I think this is where we might end up from a business perspective, is that the clinicians just want a number. I want to know if that tear film's a 5 or a 10, you know, and that to me is a bit of a failure, but from a business point of view, we might have to go that way. But my success is actually allowing people to see what I see. So my tip is also in that process, ask people you are dealing with what success looks like to them. In fact, one of these key opinion leaders, I did that. I said, well, what success look like to you? And you know what it was? It was, I want to be able to close my business at 4:30 so I can get home to my family early. That was just fantastic to know that and understand that. So my learnings are being small is your strength. No one knows your company or product better than you do. Believe it, trust in it. It means you have to do everything as much as possible yourself. Customer and market research at the outset, you know, does anyone want your product? Is it viable? What do they want it to look like, et cetera, et cetera. You've got to do that hard work. Don't let someone else do it. You've got to understand that. At this stage, while we're small, I'm doing all the financials ourselves. I will talk about that in a minute, but all of these structures which I'm dealing with have different structures to their financial, and I have to report to those. So cash flow, budgets, research and development grant, all these things all have different structures. And so all of the money gets put into, so I account for these things in different ways. Another thing which I'll talk about a bit later is set up your document management system while you're small. I'll come back to that. It's related to regulatory affairs. Be really aware of what regulatory affairs want and do that right at the beginning. And it's hard work, but you've got to do that. Don't just go on your merry way and find that you should have done something earlier. And the website, you'll need to develop your website. We've neglected ours, I'll tell you that, because I cannot spend time monitoring it. We don't have the resources to monitor it. So when you're ready to monitor your website, update it, all those types of things, that's the time to do it. And our time is right now. We will be doing that in the near future. Being small is your strength. At this stage, the very early stage, it's so important to develop your company culture. And part of our company culture is that everyone in the team is actually the best in the world at what they do. That seems strange, but I believe it's true. And what's that mean? They love helping and seeing others do great things. They're honest, they're generous, they're humble, and they love learning and improving. They take risks. And they never work hard. And that's the strange thing. They don't work hard simply because it's fun. It never, ever seems like hard work. It is just pure fun. And they never talk about themselves. The other thing is there's no blame. It's about taking responsibility. If anyone says, oh, it's his fault or her fault, this is a total no-no. And we actually talk about company culture, as opposed to say, actually, I'm responsible for this. This is what I'm doing. It's so important. And part of our culture is that our customers, every customer, we regard as part of our team. We involve them. We tell them about changes we're doing. We ask them questions. It's so important. We want our customers to be part of our team. We will learn from them. And the other thing which can pull you down is to keep thinking about all of the things you've got to do. You have to focus on the things which you've achieved. And we do that and we talk about that. It's so important. It also enables us to make decisions quickly, and they can be zany decisions. For example, we're actually on the space program to get our device on the space station. And that decision was made without consulting the board and so on. In terms of the company, it's probably a disaster, because how's that going to improve sales or our market or whatever? It's just a good fun thing. I know we will be interacting with the best engineers, the best scientists, people who want to have fun, of like mind and so on in the world. And in fact, just this morning, I had a phone call to link up with 2 other startups, one in the States, one in Japan, to get on the NASA program. This is going to happen. I've got 5 days to do it. It will happen. It's just such fun. And you can only do that if you're small. You don't have to consult lawyers and all the rest of it. So do it while you're small. One of the problems is that people within your company, while you're small, will make decisions which annoy you, but you've got to step back, let them make those decisions, let it annoy you, but let them take the responsibility for it. That happens, suck it up. And it's great because you want them to do that. You want them to make mistakes, and you want to be able to discuss it and move on. So it's about laying the foundations while you're small. Regulatory affairs is really important. You've got to be cognizant of that. You've got to get the documents, and really you've got to set up the structure of the company and the behaviour around regulatory affairs. So you've got to look at TGA, FDA and CE requirements. You've got to think any day someone's going to walk through your door and investigate you as a regulator. This means that, for example, this is actually a standing agenda item on our board about regulatory affairs, where we are, whether people understand what happens if, let's say, a cable's missing. Who's responsible? Who do you go and contact? Do you need to contact? Can you just get another cable? Whatever. All of that needs to be done, and you need to be aware of it. Governing that is various ISOs. The 62304 is about computer software, 60601 is about medical devices in general, and there's quality management. Get your structures right, and unfortunately, you have to purchase those ISOs, which annoys me quite intensely. So what we've learned from that is that you actually need an active document management system. And in that, you have to work out the responsibilities, signing off, record keeping, testing processes, protocols, tracking, labelling, complaints handling system, technical, all these things. You're not going to get it right at the start, but it's a working document, and you have to have that culture of documenting everything right at the beginning. As part of that, myself and my colleague who's responsible for regulatory affairs, Burkhard Schut, pulled down one of the ISOs. Every dot point in that ISO we went through, made a summary. You can see the summary, whether it applies to us or not, this is applicable, what we're doing about it, where we are, and there's a sign off when we last looked at it, one from me and one from my colleague Burkhard Schut. And so this is a living document. If ever we get investigated, and we've had other needs for this, we pull this one out because it's so important.
Can I just ask you? Yeah, I'm just curious really about the process you went through to select your document management system. Did you evaluate many, or did you just choose one?
We looked at a number of different commercial ones, and we've got our own. And the reason for this is that we're small, but we're aware of what these computer programs allow us to do. Once we get to a certain stage, and we're probably getting to that now, we will choose one of those which fits us best, rather than trying to fit our document management system into their system. We actually need to know what it is and encourage the culture of that, so that it's really living. And that's what's expected by regulatory affairs, that this document management system and who you report to and so on is part of that regulatory affair process. So we're just getting to that stage, and we're looking at some of those things. In the meantime, they're developing, they're getting better, and I think COVID has probably done wonders for that whole area. And so we will start looking at it at about this stage, because it's getting to a stage, but it gives us a time to test things. So we had a complaint about a cable, so immediately we went to our documents and we went through the process of handling this complaint and eventually signing it off. So you can do these things when it's small, and you can discuss these rather small issues and provide those solid foundations. And that's actually why it's important that you do it yourself, because it begins to fit with you rather than trying to fit your things with what someone else finds convenient. The other thing which it enables us to realise, and we're very cognizant of that, international standards are not regulatory affairs. You have to comply with regulatory affairs, and one of the ways of doing it is making sure you comply with a regulatory standard. But you do not have to comply with a regulatory standard, providing you can prove that you comply with the regulatory affairs. So I think that's an important learning. And in terms of what you were saying before, because we had this document, when we were doing the electrical conformity testing, there was a problem, and the chap there just wanted to zap our device with 240 volts at 10 amps, and we knew that would fry our device. And we were able to go back to him and sit with him and say, this is what the regulatory affairs and the standard, the international standard says, and because of this reason and this reason, it doesn't apply. And he said, that's fine, I will sign it. I will not do that test, I will sign off on it, but you need to make sure in your risk assessment dossier that you have explained why you don't need this test. And that's what we're doing. So that, and you can have the conversation with those people. And he actually said, this is amazing, you've done this yourself. When we have consultants, they actually do not know. So I'm just going on what he said. And so we've been able, we may have come out of that conversation with him saying to us, you actually, and us agreeing, you do need to zap this device with 240 volts. But we can have that conversation and understand the reasoning. It's so important to the business. So another little tip is that there are international standards from Estonia. They're often quite a bit cheaper. So have a look on the Estonia site for buying those documents. It annoys me intensely that you have to buy them, but anyway, that's just a little tip which we've learned. The other important thing about regulatory affairs is the product insert. So We're a class 1 device, which means that you basically submit all the things yourself, assess whether you're ready for TGA. So we did that. Within a week, they said, yep, we approve it. You've self-assessed. Great. Class 1 device. We're happy with that. Send us your product insert. And that's amazing. So, and I'd done that. I'd done our product insert and so on and spent a long time doing it. But it's actually a critical document. The regulator wants to see that. They looked at our document. Within an hour of getting the document, they said, that's fine. Don't need to talk to you anymore.
So just for any audience members who may not know, can you explain what the product insert is?
The product insert is a document which you give out to the consumer with the product. It contains all sorts of things. And these are some of the things I'll go through it. It contains warnings. So you can say, in our case, do not use it where the anaesthetics are being used, because that indicates that I've read that ISO, its normal environment is not in an operating theatre. And so when things are in an operating theatre, they can't cause sparks and all this sort of stuff because they might cause a fire in the anaesthetics and so on. So all the warnings, and so the product labels have to have certain icons and so on. And so you make sure that they're all there, what you have to go to. So all of this is in your product insert. Recall information, so there's things about warranty, about who the person can contact if they've got a complaint, all these types of things. The technical description of the device. This is really critical. Ours is a class 1 device, and one of the things which governs a class 1 device, it's not diagnostic. So the device isn't doing the diagnosis, but the clinician is using our device to get a view of the tear film, and the clinician will do that diagnosis. And so you have to be really careful of the technical description, which you can say, but you'll notice that it says nothing, and nor on our website. They monitor your website. Make sure you don't say things about your device which are particularly counter to the level of, or the class level that your device is. So we cannot say anything about diagnostics, okay? That will put us into class 2. And we do have plans to go into that area, but that will take a number of years. So class 1 is the lowest level of regulatory affairs, and so it's the least hurdle to step over. So that product insert, they look at it, they go, wow, this person has read all the regulations. It gives them this instant view that your self-assessment is actually accurate. Another thing which I learned, which is really important, I think, is that there's this FDA 3602A. So if you are actually applying for regulatory affairs in the USA, there is this form which you don't have to fill in, but if you fill it in, it's recognition that you are a small business. And for foreign small business, so you do this foreign small business certification request. This involves a document which you fill in, and our tax department has to fill in one of the pages. So you send it off to them, and then they send it. They're really great. The tax department is fantastic. They send it back to you. You then get a number, and you can then sign up for this being a small business. It lasts for 1 year. It lasts for the financial year. So it ends irrespective of when you register on September the 30th, and then you have to reapply the next year. What it does is that so there's an annual registration fee, which is about $5,000. So be ready to apply for your device registration and so on during that annual year. But what it means is your first request is actually free, and then there's massive reductions, and I mean massive. So instead of being charged something like $50,000 US, you're being charged $5,000 for the same thing. So it's a really important document to know about. Just look it up and go through that. Some other matters. any questions which you have, just ask the regulator. So anytime I had problems in sorting out my regulatory affairs, I just ring up TGA. They are just, or the tax department, anything. They are just wonderful. And I say, oh, they'll say, have you got such a, just a second, I've got to go and find it. I say, don't panic, just go and find it, take your time. They are so helpful, and it's first-hand information. All of the dealings with them are recorded. They give you case numbers, all sorts of things. They are the best people to talk to. So always ask at the source. It's so important. In the USA system, we've done a pre-sub because we're looking at an equivalence to existing devices. So you actually, there's this process where you can ask about your device and so on beforehand. So please do that. That's free. You get really great information back. Pre-sub stands for pre-submission. So this comes back to your earlier question, who do you choose and why? Well, in terms of legal things, it's really interesting. You do need, I think, a professional in this area. And the reason is simply because it's changing. It's changing. There's a case which comes out, which means blah, 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 blah. And they're monitoring that all of the time. The other thing is that once you actually register your patent and so on, there are always people who send you bills and so on, which look like the real thing, and they are very good at it. And so our patent, our lawyer looks after all of that. So anything which comes to us directly, we can just simply ignore because it's not right. It's people trying to scam you and get money from you. Now, the other thing is patent lawyer versus patent attorney. Now, a patent attorney is not necessarily a qualified lawyer. They may work within a law office, but they're a patent attorney. From what I can make out in my experience with this is that their job is to get your patent through the patent process. They are very, very good at it. It's usually cheaper than using a patent lawyer. The patent lawyer is a person who stands up in court and will defend your patent. So when a patent lawyer is helping you draft your patent, and that you are heavily involved in that, there's no doubt about it, you can't escape that. The patent lawyer is seeing it from the perspective of him or her standing up in court in defending your patent. Okay, it costs more, like heaps more, but that's a judgment you'll have to make, whether you can afford it at that time and the risks which you take. We've taken that risk and, oh, gee, it's annoying, and there's a lot of silly nonsense with regulators or, you know, the patent office and so on, where you've used the wrong word or something and then you have to do it all again, and each iteration costs. So it just seems ridiculous to me. That's the way the system works. And unfortunately, at this stage, you just have to suck it up, and it's just very annoying, but work with them, and they are actually going to support you and hopefully in the long term save you money, because you actually don't want anyone challenging you in the outset, because just the challenge will cost you a lot of money even if you win at the end. So you want to have it so that they can't challenge you in the first place. Also, think about and use as often as possible non-disclosure agreements, because you'll be talking to people regarding your product. And these can be one-way or two-way. And again, talk to your lawyers about that side of things. So that's where we've gone. They're the experts, and we've got someone who's heavily involved in international patents and things like, and trademarks as well. That's another thing which you need to defend. Otherwise, people steal your trademark, such as, for instance, the Aboriginal flag. You know, you've really got to think about these things fairly early on. Unfortunately, it's quite costly. In terms of funding, a lot of the funding depends on milestones. So I would say whenever you're applying funding, venture capitalists or whatever, don't be ridiculous on your milestones, what you can achieve. Be really thoughtful, be really honest. And the other thing is you have to realise you're negotiating with people where their view of success is completely different from yours. So in terms of venture capitalists, my view on this, and you know, maybe other people have a different view, but They actually are investing their money. What they want is to get to a particular milestone so that someone else will buy them out. That's what it is. It's about them making money. They do not necessarily want you to have clinicians see what the tear film looks like. They don't care about that. They want your product to get to this milestone that makes it attractive for another investment to come in over the top of them. The medical devices fund, it's similar, although absolutely supportive of small, that's what they want. They want small businesses to be successful. There's a lot of flexibility, but nevertheless, you have to define all of your milestones and so on, and it centres around basically making sure within the purview of what you want to do, but being a successful business in New South Wales and employing people in New South Wales and so on. And I believe that. We are great. You know, this country, this state is great. And if you can't do it here, you can't do it anywhere. So, and they help and they give you flexibility on those milestones and so on, but there's nevertheless an expectation to meet them. There's government matching schemes where if you employ someone, then they'll provide the equivalent funds. We haven't done that yet because we basically haven't been employing anyone. We've been doing all this on a voluntary basis for various reasons. Anyway, and then there are tax rebates such as the Research and Development Fund, which everyone should get into, and the Export Market Development Fund. That means that my financial reporting is, I've learned to structure it so that at the end of the year, I can report these things really easily, or at any time during the year, I've got that information available to do this reporting according to the milestones of the tax or the milestones of grants or whatever, venture capitalists. So I think that's a really important thing to do. The research and development incentive, I just thought I'd talk about that. It's a basic scientific structure. You've got to have a hypothesis and then projects to test that hypothesis and expected outcomes. And you get, I think it's 43% of the expenses you expend. It's linked to your tax return. And what it's not, it doesn't cover intellectual property or regulatory affairs. That's out of the equation. And it doesn't cover things that are done by someone you employ and there's an expectation that as part of their normal professional duties, they'd be able to do that, such as set up a database or something like that. There are people who will do that for you and it's a cash cow for them, not for you. And they will take, I don't know, 10% of the research and development funds, which you get back as their payment or their other arrangements. I actually accidentally met someone who happened to be the person in charge of investigating claims in regulatory affairs, and we were talking about it, and the first year we did it, I think we got $17,000 back from the research and development incentive. And for us, that was like gold. I tell you, that was so important to us at that stage, the 17,000. And I said to her, oh, it's just fantastic. And the people, when I ring them up, they were so helpful and so on. He said, did you do all this yourself? And I said, yes, we did this ourselves, but it's my bread and butter because I'm a scientist, hypothesis, all this sort of thing. He said, you know, when I investigate, the first thing I do is get the CEO in a room with me and I say, tell me about your research and development. And if they don't know, they're gone. Basically, they're gone. So you need to know that and you need to control it. And if you don't, you need to learn it, what it is. Okay, in turn, it's part of your tax return. You need to keep all your invoices and have all that. And I've got them linked to my database. So if any time I get a message from research and development to say, oh, we're just querying this, I can pull it up. It's really good, makes it easy. The export market development grant, we're kind of moving in that direction, but it does cover IP and developing your patent and so on. However, not for Australia and New Zealand. So any of our patenting associated with Australia and so on and New Zealand has to be kept separate for my reporting. And they look at your bank accounts, they have access to your bank accounts, and they look at it and they work with you on it. They're not trying to stop you, but clearly to me, lots of people are trying to scam this, and it's so wrong because it's meant to help you. So don't scam it, they will find it out. Don't worry about that. And again, the reporting's a separate form. It's not part of your tax return, and you need all your invoices and receipts against individual projects, and on those things, what the person's done for you is on those receipts, they look at them. So, you know, and if you've got all those, they clearly don't look at them all, but they'll look at some, and, you know, and they tick you off really quickly if you've got all of that in place. Okay, now we come to developing and manufacturing TearView. This has been a really interesting thing from the initial concept and contacting the guys from Intratherm. The advantage, I guess, of being old, like we are, our team, is that we have this amazing array of contacts and experience. And these guys just said to us, well, what are the specs which you need? They then sourced the sensor which we needed. This sensor is strictly governed by the military, and we have to have, and in fact, they have permits to get this sensor into the country. There are two places where equivalent sensors are made. One's in Israel, so clearly these are important for, it's probably a country you might expect to have that sort of technology, and the USA. And even so, their contacts, and we're actually getting ours from Israel, their contacts there mean that they look through their production runs and we get the ones with the highest specs. So there's a range of specs and they send us the ones with the highest specs off their production runs. So their knowledge, their contacts enable us to do things that other people can't. It's just fantastic. And plus, we have a backup for our supply. So if they're not available in Israel, we can get them from the United States. So we did some 3D printing. 3D printing's marvellous. And really, the other thing is, and people should look at it, you can access university students. University students are looking for projects, so you put them on the project, you work with them and so on. And if you want to pay them, you pay them. If you don't want to pay them, you don't pay. I didn't pay them. So, and they will do these designs, they will learn from it, they will work with you, and basically they will have a lot of fun. And they're good. They are really good, these students. We then did some initial testing. You can see that this is a slightly different design from this one, different housing and so on. We did all this design ourselves. It's connected by a cable to a tablet, and this is an interesting thing. There's a tablet, and we developed all the software for that tablet. So this is basically what it looks like, but this is our device, not the tablet. And this is important in regulatory affairs, because if we actually sell this tablet with our device, then we're responsible for all of the things associated with electromagnetic conformity and all that with the tablet, which is made by some other manufacturer. So we actually sell our device, and if people want, they can have the tablet free. So most people choose to have the tablet thrown in. So during the process, you make the minimum viable product. We tested it in clinics. This is our plastic one, 3D printed. It's easy to adjust, make those adjustments. You know your device, and it's really important to be involved at that early stage, getting this minimal viable product. Don't just hand it off to someone else. What we found often is that those who are so-called helping you are learning their skills at your expense. In terms of industrial design, when we got to a certain stage, we sent our designs and worked with an industrial designer. The biggest advantage there is, what is the mechanism of manufacture? Shall we cast it? Shall we machine it? Who would do that? All those sorts of costs, and they know that, they have those contacts, and that's what we use them for. And they can make sure that the design, the final design, is suitable for that purpose, and that's where they were useful. However, in doing that, they often change your design. So one of the features of these sensors is that the really sweet spot in these sensors, which we need to hit, is off-center. And so our design for the casing and so on was all off-center, and they corrected it for us. So when this new casing and so on was machined, although we could just squeeze our device in, if we needed to be able to insert the lens from the front, and we couldn't do that, and so on. So they thought they were helping us and that we'd made a mistake. So it wasn't the case. So there are problems in going out, and you have to have clear communication when you're dealing with other people. The electronic development, be really cognizant of electromagnetic conformity. One of the big issues is if it's mains power, there is a whole lot of tests. So ours isn't mains power. Ours is being powered by the tablet battery, and we specifically say on our product insert not to connect it to the mains. So that excludes us from a whole lot of this zapping it with 240 volts, 10 amps and what happens and so on, and that saved us a lot of things. Our device also doesn't contact the patient. Just be aware of all the regulations associated with devices contacting the patient, and the other things which might be subsidiary things such as cables. We sell the cable with ours, and so that comes under the electronics development as well. Another critical thing to ours was a bespoke lens development. It's a critical component, quite a important component, because normal glass, this is just some background of interest, normal glass doesn't let the infrared wavelength that we're looking at through, so we have to use special compounds to make these lenses and so on, and what we're trying to do is get the camera as far away from the eye as possible, but see the whole eye, just fill the field with the whole eye, and so on. So, and it has to be really, really fast, the lens, because the amount of energy that the camera's detecting is hardly anything, but we have to be able to see that and do a movie on it. So there's a lot of things associated with the lens. So we ended up doing a bespoke lens development. We're in our third iteration, and this works really, really well, but this will be a trade secret because ultimately it's pretty easy to dismantle a lens and copy it. So, and it's hard to patent that. One of the important things about manufacture is to consider fairly early on the scalability, and that will determine the manufacture process, and also the standard operating procedures and what checks you do. So if you get someone else to manufacture something, when you get the device in, what parameters do you check to make sure that it fits your requirements? And that has to be done, documented, all the rest, your testing procedures. Fortunately, Infratherm has all those testing procedures, and so that's important. Another thing which we now have to consider, basically your product is your problem. And so you need to make sure you're manufacturing it out of devices, out of substances which you can recycle. It will all end up in your rubbish bin, and just be aware of that. The software, again, speak to the customers, know what you need. There are various standards, minimal viable product. Ours has been through a number of iterations, but we got it out there with the minimal viable product. Various screens, this is the patient data information. This is the use where the person interacts with it, and they just push this button to do a recording of the right eye, this for the left eye, and then they can recall the data and review it and all the rest of it. And so they're just basics, but it's really simple for the user. We spend probably 5 minutes for them to look at it, and they know how to use it, and they just love it. They love it. But we keep getting feedback from them and so on. There's also this back-end stuff which we've got to deal with, which the user never finds out about. It's about security, and that's required in the computer ISO, that when data is transferred away from your device, that it has to be secure. Patient records have to be secure. There's also the way you set up the database which are all these types of things, and they're things which we talk about. This DICOM is how medical images are the standard for medical images. So you have to set up your software about what the standards are for medical imaging and so on. And this is the current standard. So it dealt with that.